I mean, how do you deal with somebody, you know, from your staff who wants to post about this great other game he's playing? I mean, how do you manage that? What are the rules?
Well, I mean, that in particular would never be a problem, because I think that talking about other games, I don't see a negative to that. It only gives you credibility as a game developer, and it's not like the competition is so fierce over each, you know, penny that you don't want to promote other products. I mean, I talk about other products all the time. So,
But, well,
What's your favorite EA game, Ken?
Manhunt 5.
You asshole.
well, but
Four.
well, but Ken, I mean, I have to put this one off because you got in a bit of trouble coming on my podcast talking about a game. I don't know if you remember this one, but this one made that one.
And then after hearing what you guys were talking about last couple weeks, I picked up Lair. Let me speak in these guys' defense for a minute as game developers, because I'm sure somebody came to them at some point and said, we have this motion controller, and we have to make a go of it, you know, and we really think you should try to make your game exclusively on that.
So your defense of Lair is that an executive asked them, maybe potentially an executive asked them to just incorporate this and forget about analog?
Well, probably, because you know, they had an expensive lawsuit. You know, I'm just speculating. It's not like inside information. Sure, they had an expensive lawsuit with that, you know, with that Rumble company. So they sort of seemingly at the last minute threw in this motion control stuff, and that has to, like, you know, they have to sort of follow through on that. They're sort of corporate staff. They need to follow through on that, and I think Lair came out of that to some degree, and it looks like an interesting game.
So I mean, you know, in retrospect, you know, do you regret doing that? Personally, I find those kinds of conversations the most interesting to listen to, right? Listen to one designer talk about something they saw in another game.
No, because I think to some degree it's probably true. I mean, I don't think somebody woke up and said, you know what I want to do with this game we spent like 5 years on? I want to take this huge fucking risk. That you know, that's not really a developer decision. You know, I don't think that's probably a developer decision. It's, you know, there are, when people invest, I mean, we can pretend we're not working at, you know, organizations that are large public corporations, but we are. And there is a component where a large public corporation wants you to make money, not lose money. And you know, that's just the reality. And when a company makes a large investment in a technology, like the motion control stuff, you know, on PlayStation 3, I can imagine there were several conversations that said we need to make sure that people buy this thing, they're happy with their purchase. So look, I mean, the Lair thing ended up being a clusterfuck. I believe they ended up patching normal control into it. But I was just trying to give a perspective on how that stuff might happen. I don't think somebody wakes up and says, I really want to stick it to every gamer who buys it. I just want to give some perspective on how it happens, because when I hear something like that, I really think they're probably a bunch of idiots. I usually think, like, how did they get there?
Right. Well, and I think that, you know, before we're running out of time quickly here, and I do want to open this up to questions, but, you know, I think that just speaking from the other side of the, you know, headset of my iPod, that's the stuff that's the most interesting, is when we actually get some insight into what's going on in the development process. So, you know, let me ask, I don't want to pile on Ken here, but, you know, at what point will we start seeing stuff about the game, you know, WWON, and how much access can we really get? Because, to pick an example, you know, let's say you make a decision that you're going to have, you know, one kind of combat system or another, and you record a great sort of BS session around a table where you're debating, we're going to have combat system A or we're going to have combat system B. Personally, that's going to get me really interested in the game. I'm going to be excited. I'm going to want to hear about the decision process, and I'm going to know when the game comes out which decision you made. Yeah. You may have made the wrong freaking decision, in which case I'm going to be able to sit here and totally second guess your process. But it would be the most interesting stuff to listen to.
Here's the one thing I think as developers that gives us pause. There is a notion of so-and-so promised this feature, which you hear all the time. Like, he promised this, promised that. Which is difficult when you're talking about a product that takes several years to develop. When you come up with a feature, what you do is you put it in, you develop it, and if it's no fun, you take it out. And so it's very difficult sometimes to talk about things, especially if the word promise. If it becomes a promise, you don't want to have to sort of like have a lawyer there who stipulates every single thing you say is not actually, what Ken just said is not actually a legal promise, and that's not really what you want when you're talking to people. But you also, so you want to be talking in a casual way about what you're doing because people are interested in the process, but you also don't want to dig a hole for yourself.
Right.
Where people think you're saying, when you spend your $59.99, which is a lot of money, and I get that, you're absolutely going to get this thing.
Yeah, that's probably been like my frustration joining, is that I never really expected it to work this way, but what I found is that game design studios are a lot like, say, the reality shows, the competitive reality shows you get on Bravo or something, where you have people, they're interesting. Like, it's much more interesting to watch Project Runway or Top Chef for me than it is to watch some show that's just like, how can fat people fit through shapes that are like... This is like where they gauge their own mastery and like self-fulfillment. So, every day, when you're making a game, you have all these competitions where one group of people has an idea, an individual might have an idea. These might pertain to, implementing a feature as far as programming goes, or a game design thing. Or it could be as specific as how many hit points does an enemy have, And the danger there, if, for one, I think maybe a studio that has nothing to lose, has no reputation and everything to gain by it, they could do this, and I think it might work and it'd be interesting, and we'd really get a sense for the people involved. But the problem for something like us would be, say you do, like Julian was implying, say we have a meeting and we're deciding, it's like the 5th time we're tweaking parameters on an AI or something, and we decide that they're going to be this. But we have a public record available where there's a lot of naysayers, people saying, I'm telling you now, this is going to create these consequences and these repercussions, and then the game comes out and it turns out the majority of players and critics and stuff are like, it's horrible that they did this, but not only have you given them the ability to pinpoint what it is that they think is wrong with it, but they can go back and say, well, they didn't just make a mistake, they knew better. They had dissenting voices and they just refused to listen, and that's even worse, right? I mean, you really don't want that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, we constantly deal with that. It's like when we're talking about games on podcasts, or we're giving that window into the development process, we're like putting up black sheets over the things that are still very much work in progress, and we're not sure about it. Because until we're sure about it, we don't want to talk about it and upset people. But like you said, that's the most interesting part of the game development, is these meetings and where these decisions are made, but we can't talk about them until months later when we've seen where that has gone. So actually, one of the things we really want to do when we are doing now at Insomniac is starting to document things as we go along. And yes, you won't be able to see it as it happens, but eventually we're going to show you some of these initial meetings on projects and things like that that you never got to see before, because that is what people want to see.
Yeah,
and cool. We're really focused on trying to bring that to our next few projects and have a record of the projects as they were under development.
So if you really want to come see what it's like, come work for us. That's what I tell people all the time. They want to know how do they learn how features work and so forth. And a lot of it is for each of us, it's top proprietary information. It is the most interesting information, and that's kind of why it's proprietary sometimes, unfortunately.
Right. So the kimono can only get so
Yeah,
open.
absolutely.
All right, I just want to open it up to questions. I think we have somebody running around with a mic. Hopefully.
Go to the side of the room.
Come to the center of the
There's a
room.
center
Yeah.
behind them.
You're first.
It might die halfway through.
Testing. Hey guys. I was wondering that when you compare podcasting to other forms of marketing like print and banner ads, how do you think it measures up? And specifically to Shawn and Jeff, do you think that, since you mentioned you made CGW Radio and GFW Radio a complete product, do you really think it pushed subscriptions at all?
It was my guess that we did attract people to take a look at our print magazine just because they ended up liking what we did. And with our podcast, to speak to irrational behavior for a minute, I think really you're going to have a limited draw in the beginning because you don't have the big shiny news to announce. And this is where we totally envy something like Major Nelson, where every week he's got a ton of new information available. And that is in part, what's driven me to focus on the people. But I think in a perfect world what happens is that you reach early adopters and influencers among the peer groups, and they just feel invested in what you're doing. They feel as though they know something about you, and they're ready to buy your game. Even whether they're convinced it's going to be amazing or it might suck, they still want to give it a try because they want to see, they've been invested in the development process. And importantly, they'll tell their friends, they'll make recommendations to their friends. And the other thing, before I let Jeff talk, is I think you just really have to be persistent